Alright, so I've seen a lot of people having problems with JP. I've seen comments in the YouTube comments, I've seen Twitter comments, I've seen a lot of stuff. People hate this character. They hate fighting against him. I've even seen some people begging for nerfs week 1, saying that it's impossible to get in, his zoning's too good, you can't physically beat JP. Now, I'm not in a position to start talking about character strength and tier lists and whatnot, but having played JP for almost exclusively the last week, I thought I'd offer some tips from a JP player's perspective on how best to beat this character. The kind of tools that you're going to need to survive against the onslaught of JP zoning. Alright, so number 1, most important thing you need to learn if you want to stand a chance against JP is how to use parry properly. This mechanic is in the game for a reason, and one of the reasons it's in the game is because if it wasn't, JP would be unstoppable. Now, if you don't know, parrying in Street Fighter 6 has a few interesting properties. First of all, if you parry a projectile, you get all of the drive gauge you spent on the parry straight back. Let me show you. Alright. So you see, every single time I block a projectile in this game, I lose a little bit of drive gauge. And because JP can put so many projectiles on the screen at once with, you know, this, and this, and this, and this, you're just going to lose all of your drive gauge if you just sit around blocking. The nice thing about parry, it refunds the cost of the drive gauge that you spent to parry. The other nice thing about parries is that they don't care about high-lows, which is another important thing for fighting JP. JP has 2 different fireballs that can hit high or can hit low. His heavy kick fireball hits low, his medium kick fireball hits high. It's kind of unusual in Street Fighter to have this, but you don't want to be worrying about which version of fireball it is, because if you parry, it just covers for both of them. It'll automatically protect you against both the low and the high fireball. So as long as you're parrying properly, JP can't really build much momentum. But that doesn't mean you should be mashing parry. You shouldn't be just pressing parry as soon as you see JP do a projectile, because JP has a lot of ways to bait out parries. So this is where like the layer 2 of the mix-up comes in. So JP has a few different options for this. He has a fireball feint, like this. He starts out throwing the fireball and then stops. And this is partly to bait out parries. He also has a command grab, which will not only grab you if you try and parry, but it'll also punish counter you. You don't want to be autopiloting your parries. So what I recommend for this, what you want to do is you want to train yourself to parry as late as possible. You don't just want to see if you see a projectile, don't just mash parry. Like, don't press parry the second that you see a projectile, because that's just going to end in disaster. What you want to do is you want to wait until the fireball is as close as possible, identify which projectile it is, and then decide to parry. That way you don't get caught out. If you wait until the projectile has traveled most of the way towards you and then decide to parry, it's much easier to react to whether it's the fireball or the slow command grab. You have to pay attention to the animation here. The command grab has a different animation, is much slower, and has a different voice clip. So you need to try and parry as late as possible. If you parry perfectly late, you'll get a perfect parry. There you go. So you get a slightly different animation if you perfect parry, and if you do that, then you cancel out of the recovery immediately. There's like no block stun. So if you can perfect parry this projectile consistently, go for it. I'm kind of bad at it at the moment, so I like to just do a regular parry, but late. The window to perfect parry is small, but you don't need to. Okay, the next tip I have about JP is knowing his restrictions on what he can use. So what I mean by this is JP actually has some rules about what can be on the screen at the same time. So for example, he has his command grab, this thing. But if he puts a portal out, like this, for the entire time that the portal is on screen, JP completely loses access to his command grab. If you try and input it, nothing happens. So you need to be aware that whenever the portal is out, you are at no risk of getting hit by the command grab. The only thing he can do is more projectiles. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You don't have to stress too much about getting grabbed from full screen if the portal is out, because you just can't do the command grab. Alright, so that's the basics of how to kind of like mitigate his fireballs, but that doesn't really teach you how to approach JP. So the next thing I want to talk about is actually getting in on JP while he's doing all of his nonsense. Okay? So what you need to know about JP's fireballs is that they have a kind of strange property. They don't have a hitbox until they suddenly get close, and that's when the slash comes out. They kind of fly out towards you as the cloud, and then when the game detects that you're in range, that's when the slash at the end happens. Now, the detection on that slash is actually not perfect, and if you're moving forward fast enough, you can actually pass straight through JP's fireballs, because it won't react in time to transition from traveling into the slash. So different characters have different answers to this. It's worth testing different things for different characters, but I'll show you a couple of examples that I know. There you go. So one thing you can do if you play a character with a fast drive rush, you can literally just run straight through it. The timing depends on how good your character's drive rush is. If it's a slow one, this won't work. But if you've got a fast drive rush like Ken, Jury, DJ, and you get the timing right, you can run straight through his fireballs. And this is a highly rewarding option as well, because your normal will both... This normal at the end is both a drive rush advantage and a punish counter. So whatever you hit JP with here gets 8 extra frames of advantage. So for example, something that would normally be +1 on hit becomes +9 on hit. You can basically do whatever like max damage custom combo you can think of here. I don't really know Ken's combo structure, but you can basically just like freestyle whatever combo is max damage. So this is a risky option for JP. The second option you can do is if your character has any kind of fast horizontal traveling special move, that's also a good option. Things like Honda's Headbutt will go straight through the fireballs. Blanka will go straight through the fireballs. With Ken, I think you can Dragon Lash through the fireballs. There you go. Ken can Dragon Lash through it, and again, you get punish counter advantage at the end here. So this lets you actually get full combos afterwards on moves that normally don't work. So this is more of a character specific thing, but basically almost every character in the game, as far as I can tell, has at least one move that goes through his fireballs. I don't know if like Zangief does. There are a couple of like really slow characters that don't seem to have a good way to get through, and that might just be like a matchup thing, but from what I can tell, like the vast majority do have at least one option here. Okay, so I've talked about how to hold your own at distance. I've talked about how to get in on JP. So I guess the final like stage of that process, now that you're in on JP, how do I keep him locked down? And the reason I say that is because a lot of people are having an absolute nightmare of a time trying to deal with EX counter. A lot of people are finally landing a hit on JP, going for Oki. JP does this and ruins your entire life. This is his EX counter. This will beat meaty buttons and it will beat meaty throws as well. It even gives you a full combo on meaty throw. So a lot of people are kind of having a lot of problems getting in and then staying in on JP. So in my opinion, the best answers to EX counter are shimmy, neutral jump, and projectiles. So let me show you all three of those things. So you see here I went for a throw and I got kind of blown up for it. So meaty throws are actually kind of risky against JP. You can go for them if you think he's going to block on wake up. You have to be a little bit careful. But what you can do is you can either go for a shimmy and then punish the recovery. That'll give you a full punish counter. This will also beat wake up throw tech. So this again is a huge potential combo starter. I don't know what Ryu's combos are, but you know, whatever you want to do. You can also do a similar thing. You can neutral jump, which again will beat both EX counter and a throw tech attempt. Another big option. And the one that's character specific is projectiles. So EX counter will beat physical strikes and it will beat throws, but it does not counter projectiles. So for example, if I do a meaty EX fireball, for example, as you can see there, it just beats the EX counter. The counter does not activate against projectiles. One other thing you can do against EX counter is you can go for a meaty with a light, and then the way that I'll show you the way EX counter works when you do this. So I went for a meaty crouch jab here, and the EX counter activated, but JP is not actually plus here, and there's about half a second before the bomb actually hits you. So what you can do here is you can then go for a throw, and use the animation of the throw to avoid the fireballs completely. And if JP attempts to tech the throw, you can do something with invincibility. But you could do something like that, for example. You can either go for a throw, or you can go for a combo ender with invincibility to follow up before the bombs actually hit you. I think JP's counter is a really, really good move. I think it might be one of the best defensive moves in the game, but it does have counterplay. It's not like the all-encompassing move some people are treating it as. One more thing to mention about JP is his level 2 super. This is another thing that's been giving me lots of free wins at the moment based on unfamiliarity, but I should quickly explain how this super works, because it's a little bit complicated. So JP's level 2 super, the way it works is it summons 4 projectiles that attack the opponent, and these projectiles will track to the opponent's location. So even if I do it full screen, they still appear around the opponent. What you need to remember, what you need to drill into your head is the order of blocking these. So, even though these are projectiles, some of them hit low and some of them hit high. And the order is this: mid, high, low, high. So the very first projectile is a mid, so you can block it standing or crouching. The second one is an overhead, so you have to block it standing. The third one is a low, so you have to block it crouching. And the fourth one is an overhead, so you have to block it standing. So just that alone is catching out a lot of people. They're trying to block against this level 2, crouching or standing, and just getting opened up. So you might be wondering, okay, well if it's a high-low mix-up, should I just parry? That'll protect me from the high and the low. And the answer is, it depends. These 4 projectiles are not a true block string. If I know my opponent is just going to try and parry the whole thing, I can actually just walk up and throw you in the gaps. And it will be a punish counter throw, but it depends on the situation if you want to do that or not. Sometimes there are situations where taking one punish counter throw at the cost of your opponent using up 2 bars of their super meter is actually a reasonable trade. So you can just parry, but you do open yourself up to about 20% health lost through a punish counter throw. Oh yeah, I should also mention this. You know how I said earlier JP can't use his command grab while the portal is out? Well, it turns out his level 2 is even more restrictive than that. In order to make this not the best super in the game, Capcom severely limit what JP can do while it's active. So when the level 2 is active, I can't do command grab. No command grab for me, there's no risk of a command grab. I also can't do any of my fireballs until it's over. Fireball just doesn't exist. The only specials that JP can do while level 2 is active is Portal and Portal Spike. Oh, and Ground Spike as well. So you don't have to worry too much about him, you know, hitting you with a high-low as well with his fireballs. It makes the mix-up a little bit more straightforward. I will say, if you're in Burnout, this super is almost unblockable. Because you don't have parry to save you and protect you from the high lows, if you're in Burnout, all I have to do is hit you with a low at the same time as the high is connecting, and it's basically an unblockable. This game doesn't seem to have like unblockable protection, so this super, my best advice is just pray if you're in burnout. I should mention, the level 2 actually doesn't have that fast start up. If I activate from full screen and you're not already in block stun, there's actually quite a lot of time before the first hit connects. And you can use that to try and escape before it even starts. Oh, there you go. Even with JP's slow drive rush, you can escape this if they just throw it out raw. That's another thing to be aware of. It's only really threatening if you're locked into the corner or you're already in block stun. Otherwise, you do usually have an option to get out of it. Yeah, you can also forward dash. JP does recover very fast from the activation, so if you just start running at him, he can hit you before you hit him. But sometimes that's a better outcome. It might be better to risk getting hit out of a drive rush than get hit by the level 2. Okay, so I think that covers most of the things I wanted to talk about. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of how to hold your own in neutral, how to get in on JP in neutral, what to do when you actually land the knockdown, and how to defend against his level 2 mix-up. So hopefully this helps. If it did, I'd really appreciate if you guys could subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I will see you guys in the next video.